I'm showing you this this painting that I did a few months ago, and it's in a frame and it's hanging in my living room, just to show you that normally I do a fairly loose set of leaves and flowers, but it does depend on what kind of flowers I'm doing and also just my mood for the day. So I don't have a fixed style. I'm going to remove that from the camera and show you work that I have done already on this vase of tulips, from what you saw being worked on yesterday. And for the most part, I use my palettes. I keep separate palettes for earth colors, yellows and browns, a separate one for reds and violets, and another for blues and greens, and then just grab whatever palette I need, or sometimes lay them all out. For the initial washes that were done, background washes, I would have used a flat. So this is a sable flat. The size is worn off, but it's very, very large, over an inch. And I would have used that for most of these. But then for the whole rest of the painting, I worked primarily with this number 10 sable sable brush. And the reason that I did is, first of all, it holds a lot of water, it gives good coverage, and look at that wonderful point. And then as the painting progressed, I used, again you can see this nice point too, I used this sable brush, which is a number 7. Today, so I would have done initial washes lightly and then glazed with color for more washes. So then I would have, like this would have been some glazing, let me just to show you, to bring out more color in some places. Now this is hot press paper by Arches. So this is just again to show you large areas where some more color was put in. So that's how these flowers were built up. That was just a little bit of scarlet, and I used some burnt sienna for some of these shadows on the yellow, rather than to keep them warm. So that gives you an idea. I'll do one more burnt sienna shadow just to give an idea of how these flowers were built up in terms of glazes, one glaze over another. So starting with the pale yellow, moving to a little deeper yellow, adding some Quintandone gold, and a little bit of neutral in some shadow areas. So that just gives you an idea. I'd like to change the tone of this one a little bit, make it a little more red, a little less violet, and this one also a little less rose and violet, a little more red. I think I'll put in a little bit more over here too, bring in a little more tone there of the red versus the pale pink. But today I wanted to go into the next step, in which I'm primarily going to go down to this small number 2 to do a few little highlights. Now, I was not a good watercolorist last night when I worked on this, and I didn't preserve whites, and I didn't use masking fluid. So one of the things I'm going to do and show you today is I'm going to add a little bit of white right from the tubes today. I'm going to work with 3 tubes of color today. Chinese white, Quintandone yellow, and alizarin crimson. And I'll show you why I'm going to do that. So I'll put a little bit of this Quintandone yellow on here. And for this, I'm going to use my paint right out of the tube with very little water. Do highlights. So I don't need these palettes over here. I'll stack them up, separate them, and I'm going to focus on this little plate. Let me just make sure you can see the plate. Yeah, little plate with 3 colors on it, okay? There we go. So, minimum amount of water. I want to capture a few highlights in white. Very little. Some of these edges, just a little bit, where the petal turns, to capture just a little bit of white. I don't want too much because I really ideally should have preserved the white, but I like to have a little bit of these edges a bit brighter. The paper by now is, with all the washes, a little pale, so I just want to touch up a little bit of white here and there. Not much. We don't tend to use white very much in watercolor because some of the whites are very opaque and it changes how the paper reflects the light in those opaque areas, and most of the colors that I use are transparent, not opaque. So I'm not sure I'm liking this, but give it a try. So let's see. I just want a few edges with the white. Here's an edge that I'd like a little bit of white. Here's an edge that I'd like a little bit of white. You see, it's minimal, not too thick a line, because otherwise the eye will really go to that flat, opaque area. But I have to be careful that it's not too thick and 3-dimensional, since all the other colors are. Okay. I'm listening to my favorite album, which is Bob Dylan's, one of his most recent, in his elderly years. His voice has changed, and he put out an album of old favorites that he loves, that are not ones that he wrote, and it is truly an amazing, amazing album. It's called Shadows of the Night, and many of them are love songs. And listen to his voice. So I'm just giving you an idea of how I'm doing that to make some of these flowers pop a little bit more. I'm trying not to ruin the painting by putting this fairly opaque Chinese white on here, but hoping that that might add a little bit of sparkle of light. So let me see if I can do a little bit on this one. Let's see, make that edge a little bit clear. And I've got an edge over here that I really want to accentuate. It's where the flower curves around. And then let me do a little bit to balance that out, here and here. Now, I could do the same up here on the top, but instead I'm going to use this Quintandone yellow and do a little edge work. Maybe I'll add, yeah, I'm going to mix together that Quintandone with the white. Quintandone yellow, and do a little bit of lightening of some edges where the sun might hit. Not too much, just here and there. And I think I'll do a little bit over here on this one here. Okay. Now the other thing I want to show you that I'm going to do is I'm going to take this alizarin crimson, which is an amazing color for indicating turning. I use it in portraiture to indicate the turning, say, of a nose or something else, turning at the break between a kind of neutral or dark shadow. I'm going to blend that one in, where the shadow is kind of dark, but I'm going to put it in a few places where I have a shadow on the edge of those shadows. And it will, some of those shadows are very, very dark and violet, and they look a little dull. But I'm going to put a little of this alizarin crimson in some of those shadow areas, and even bring some of it up into some lines where it's a nice color for a deep transition area. I'll just make some of these colors pop a little bit where I've got some movement of the, trying not to smudge areas that have this pure color in it. In this dark shadow, I'm going to put the red in there because that way that the shadow isn't dead looking. The alizarin crimson is a wonderful color for brightening up. those dead areas. Here's one that's really not looking very alive. And this is a flower, it's alive, it's got energy. I want that energy to not be lost. Some places I'm not just putting it on the dark shadow, I'm bringing it into the flower to bring in a little bit of life in some of those washes. So they aren't so flat looking. Very thin lines in a few areas. Okay, so this is what I was hoping to do today. I don't know if I'll put maybe a tiny bit to carry it through in some of these flowers up here. This is a little bit sad looking in that area. Again, the alizarin crimson just brightening up some of that. I can put it here in this crevice here. It'll just brighten that up a little bit. See how that came to life just like that with a glaze of alizarin crimson. Wonderful color. I mean, when I look at my palette, which I've shown you has lots of colors, and many of them have been there for years and don't get used very often. But the ones that I have to keep refilling are ultramarine blue, cobalt blue, alizarin crimson, Aurelian yellow, and cobalt turquoise are the ones that I find I'm always replenishing. I don't use the phthalo blues and greens very often because they stain, and when I do use them I have to be really sure I want that color in there. But just to show you, I did use that phthalo blue in these leaves. You see here? I wanted that intensity of the phthalo blue, which is a very intense, beautiful color. But I don't use that very often, but I did in this one, in this case. So that gives you an idea of the use of the alizarin crimson and the yellow. I'm just going to put a few of the white. Oh, that's Dolly. She wants to come in. A few of the white lines down in this wash area for this vase. I think you can see that. Let me just check the camera. Oh, nope, I have to move this so you can see it. Yes, I'm putting some white because the paper is not quite as bright now as I would like it after the various pale yellow and blue washes that I put in. So I'm just going to put in a little bit of white in those places to indicate this vase, this cut glass vase. Like I said, glass is not my thing, but the more, sometimes the less detail you put in, the better, because then the viewer decides what they see and makes up for the lack of detail. Because if you're going to put in a lot of detail, it probably should be very well done. So when you're not sure about your ability to do that, and when it comes to glass, I'm definitely not a specialist, but so there's an indication of the glass. I don't know how well you can see that. Let me bring this up a little bit more to show you how I've put in the white there. So that's, I'm going to move this back, and there you are. I think this is getting pretty close to being a done painting. So I hope you enjoyed it. Thanks for visiting. Sandra here signing off back into self-isolation, and all of you people out there, stay safe and stay healthy. Be careful and protect yourselves.